Hello everybody, and welcome back at long last to another, finally, installation in my sort of horror manga collection tour video series. You guys have been asking for it for a long time, and it's finally here. I'm going to finally take a look at the Kazuo Umezu, or Umezz, shelf of my horror manga collection. It's taken a long time to make this video, mainly because I've actually filmed this video twice already on 2 separate days. One time my camera died and I hadn't realized, and on the other occasion my head was kind of cut off in the footage because I wasn't doing it in selfie mode and I couldn't see. So I had to scrap the whole video, and then I got really discouraged and just shelved it for a while. But I'm pleased to say that I have newfound motivation to make these horror manga videos, and I'm finally getting around to answering all of your requests and finally making this video. So hope you guys find that it's worth the wait, and I hope you'll look forward to the next one after this. But without further ado, let's get right into the shelf. So for those of you who don't know, I am Chris, aka Dated, as I make music on my other channel, Ill Advised Records, and I am a huge horror manga fanatic. I have a huge collection, as you can see behind me. There is a lot more that you can't even see that's cut off in the frame right now. I have probably everything you could possibly own in terms of English horror manga, and a lot of Japanese stuff as well, and a lot of weird oddities. So I'm going to go through one at a time through my whole Kazuo Umezz shelf and show you each book that I have, some of the figures that I have, and talk a little bit about what these are, how to find them, what they're roughly worth, though without giving any too specific of numbers, as things are likely to change by the time you see this video sometime in the future. But without further ado, let's just get started. So the first item on the shelf is these. These are 2 Japanese editions of his collected works. These are stories that you can actually find in some of his English translated works, notably his Scary Book series, but these I have just because I found them for really cheap. Generally, if I can find a Japanese original edition of some horror mangaka's work, I'll pick it up if it's just a few dollars, because the artwork's cool, and a lot of the time it's stories that you can't get in English anyways. So in terms of like an art reference or something just to flip through and appreciate, it's pretty cool to have. I got these on mandarake.co.uk, I believe is the website. You'll have heard me mention that website before. It's a really great place for international shoppers to find original Japanese manga and figures, things like that, and they'll ship it overseas to you, and the price is usually pretty low because this stuff is printed into the ground over there, and a lot of the time it's used. So these are just 2 really cool items that are on my shelf. Next up, we have some more Japanese material. I'm not even 100% sure what these volumes are. I picked them up again because they were cheap. I threw them into an order when I was buying some other stuff that I wanted from Mandarake, and they're just really cool to have. Original Japanese printings. I really like when I get something with the original Obi strip still on it. I always try to keep it. It's just really cool. You don't really get Obi strips on anything here in the West, so it's cool to just have things the way they would have been found in the bookstore in Japan. And again, it's just really cool to have some of this material. This one's got manga in it, but it also seems to be a bit of a novel adaptation of something that also has horror manga in it, which is pretty interesting. So just another little oddity. Next up, we have a Japanese series. So this is a long-running series. This is 16 volumes, and this is just sort of all of Kazuo Umezz's short stories collected up until the point that these were published. This is just another cool thing to have, as most of this stuff, in fact, maybe even all of this stuff, has not been published in English. So in terms of actually owning his material, you're only going to be able to own these stories in Japanese. So as a collector, being that I found these, again, fairly inexpensive, expensively. They were just cool to add to the shelf. They fill up a lot of space. It looks really cool. It's got a lot of cool artwork in it that I can flip through and appreciate. And it's also kind of a good reference to discover some of his material that's out there. It can be hard to find scanlations of some of this stuff because it's buried on more niche manga reading websites. So if you can hold up a translator, read the titles of some of this material, and do some searching, sometimes having one of these as your starting point can help you find the translated versions of them online. And if that fails, you can always use a translator app on your phone to actually read these as well. Next up, we have a few more Japanese volumes, just some things that I picked up on Mandarake. Again, I think these are actually the last of just the Japanese stuff that I have. These are, again, things that I pick up just because they're cheap, because they're interesting to have. It's just fun to flip through these and kind of see the original printings of some of these. I mean, I don't think these are like first printing originals, but, you know, before the sort of Western lens goes over things and changes cover artwork, translates everything, reformats it, this is how people are seeing it in Japan. So it's just a cool thing to see. So on to our first English title now. We have Reptilia. This is a really, really odd one. This is something that I think I've spoken about in some other videos. The cover artwork on this is by Ashley Wood, who is a world-renowned comic book artist and video game concept artist. He's done work on the Hellspawn series for Image Comics. He's done the artwork for Metal Gear Solid, a lot of really iconic artwork for Metal Gear Solid. He does original oil paintings. He's got his own comic series like Popbot and things like that. He's just a super, super talented artist. One of my favorite artists, period, actually. But that makes it a little weird that I'm going to say I really don't like this choice for cover art. I really like the cover art. I think it's a really weird choice to put Ashley Wood artwork on a Kazuo Umezz comic. As you can see from the interior art, it very much looks like you would expect it to. It's a Kazuo Umezz old school horror manga comic. So it's really weird to throw Ashley Wood's art on there. Anybody picking this up off the shelf is gonna be like, oh, that's cool, I love Ashley Wood. And they're gonna flip it open and be like, what is this? I feel like the audience that's gonna like this cover art is probably not the same audience that appreciates old school horror manga. And anybody who does appreciate old school horror manga probably would have been more likely to grab this off the shelf if they saw Kazuo Umezz's artwork on the cover. So just an odd choice. That said, this is a tough book to find. Nowadays, I think the cheapest you're going to find this is like $50 to $60 US. I've seen it go for $100 or more. It's at that sort of critical stage right now where there's a few copies that I see floating around here and there that are priced a little bit lower, and a ton of copies that are like $100 plus. So I think once some of those cheaper copies start moving, the price of this is going to go up. I was fortunate enough to pick this up I'd say about 5 years ago. I even then had to pay like $40 for it, and I thought that was a little high at the time, but it's just going up and up and up. So if you're interested in getting a copy of this, I would say do it as soon as you can, because there are not a lot of these out there. Next up, we have a series called Scary Book, and that would be these. So these are an older printing. I believe these were printed in the 90s, though I'm not 100% sure. But these are a Dark Horse printing. Dark Horse, way back in the 90s and early 2000s, did a lot of horror manga printings. You'll find a lot of stuff that you'll see coming out by Viz nowadays has older printings, like Junji Ito's works have been published by Dark Horse back in the day. And these old Dark Horse printings of horror manga are getting pretty hard to find. And for these books, these are the only version of these Kazuo Umezz stories that you will find in English. So if you're looking to own all of the English works of Kazuo Umezz, these are must-have items. Now, these are getting pretty expensive. I looked them up just before doing this video just to get a better idea of where they are right now. And for some reason, Volume 2 Insects is actually the cheapest right now. I think it was around $100 for the copies that I managed to find. But for the other two copies, they're at well over $200 in terms of like all of the listings that I could find for them. So this series is very scarce, and it's going up in price. It's very much like the old Museum of Terror Junji Ito books. There's just not a lot of them out there. For a while, those ones were also the only printings of certain stories by Junji Ito. These similarly are the only printings of these stories by Kazuo Umezz in the West, so I suspect they're just going to keep going up in price. So I would say keep an eye out for auctions of these on eBay. If you're going to be looking to pick one up, you can probably snag one for less than 100 if you're really patient. But if you want the set right now, be prepared to spend $400 to $600 for a set of these, because they are really climbing up there. Next up we have The Drifting Classroom. This is the original printing by Viz from their signature collection. They've recently reprinted them as an omnibus series, which I'll show you guys in a minute. But this is quite a long series. There's 11 books total. I've got all 11 of the originals right there. And in fact, I actually have had, I think, 2.5 sets of this total. I buy lots of just random horror manga sometimes to see what I can get and see if I can get a good price, and just from doing that for a few years, I ended up having a second full set of these and then another half set of these. So I sold those off near the beginning of COVID and was kind of surprised how much some of these go for, especially around the time that I sold them. I haven't double checked right before making this video what the price of these is, but I know certain volumes, it used to be, I think, 7 and 11 were well over $100, and now a lot of even the lower volumes, like volume 1, are climbing up there, and so this set is getting pretty pricey. Fortunately, if you want to read Drifting Classroom, which is arguably Kazuo Umezz's greatest series, it's certainly his most popular here in the West, you can get the new Omnibus series. So this is one of the volumes of the new Omnibus. There are 3 volumes of these, and they're all pretty gargantuan. I actually just did a quick size comparison, and this is definitely the largest volume of English horror manga you can find. It's actually bigger than the collected Berserk volumes. It's bigger than Junji Ito's Tomie, which I think was probably the runner-up before these. These are absolutely massive, beautiful books with nice hardcovers on them. Really worth the price. The cover price on the back of these, $35 US. I would say it's worth that. There's a lot of manga in here. And this is the much more affordable way to collect the whole series. It'll be cheaper for you to get 3 of these omnibus volumes than it will be to get all 11 of the smaller little digest versions. So if you want to read Kazuo Umezu's Drifting Classroom, this is the way to do it nowadays. As far as the story goes, it's very much like apocalyptic Lord of the Flies with more supernatural stuff going on. It's a really good read. Kazuo Umezz is known for writing stories that are either sort of made for, or many times are starring younger children, like elementary school age kids, dealing with terrifying, very adult situations, and seeing how they sort of problem solve, how they deal with terrifying situations, how they sort of compartmentalize everything. It's a really interesting read, something that is appealing to kids, I would think, in that it's sort of relatable to see protagonists who are around the same age, but is definitely not necessarily a kid's book. This is very appealing to adults as well. It deals with very mature subject matter, and it has lots of amazingly detailed backgrounds, gruesome deaths, crazy monsters, just a lot of eye candy in these if you're a horror fan. Absolutely worth checking out. If you've never read any Kazuo Umezz, this is the place to start for sure. And if you've read Junji Ito's works and you're looking for another author to get into, this is a good place to go. There's a reason Viz has started publishing these series after the success of all the Junji Ito material. So get your hands on these if you can. So next up we have something old and something new. We've got, first off, Orochi Blood. This is an interesting one. This is published, I believe, by Viz. Yes, this is a Viz publication, but this is actually from a series of Orochi, which spans several volumes in Japan, and for some reason they only published Blood, which was actually the last story out of that series. They were all individual, self-contained stories that starred this main character Orochi, who is this sort of immortal psychic being, and she sort of goes through all these situations, gets involved with different people, and sort of gets tied up in these horror-themed situations where she tries to help people or figure out the mystery. And for some reason they went with just this last one, and they didn't publish any of the ones leading up to it. It's still great as a standalone. It's an amazing collector's piece. This is out of print now, and the price is certainly going up. I haven't checked recently to see what this is going for. I know at the time I picked this up it was about $80, and I managed to get my copy for about half of that by just being patient, watching auctions. But now I think the price is probably going to go down a bit because they are reprinting this series. And that brings me to the next one, which is this new nice hardcover Orochi printing. This is the first series, which I don't know if it's got the title written right on it. No, so they actually haven't gone with subtitles for these, so it's just Orochi Volume 1. But unlike the Blood printing, they're actually publishing all of Orochi. So I believe 1 is out now, and you can already pre-order Volumes 2 and 3. I've got mine pre-ordered, so they'll be showing up in the future. And I don't know if they're planning to go beyond Volume 3, or if Volume 3 will collect all of the stories. I think that's probably all there's going to be. But it's really nice to see them finally go back and reprint all of the original Orochi stories leading up to Blood instead of just printing that Blood chapter. So these are pretty affordable, they're beautiful, hardcover. It's just wonderful to see Kazuo Umezz getting modern printings, and to see that there's still a following. Obviously with Junji Ito blowing up and horror manga becoming very popular, I think we're only going to see more printings of Kazuo Umezz's works, so I love to see it. Next up, we have quite possibly the rarest books that you can get from Kazuo Umezz right now, and that is Cat-Eyed Boy. So this is Volume 1 and 2. These are big, thick omnibus volumes published by Viz quite some time ago. I think these are 2000s publishings, though I'm not 100% sure, and it doesn't say on the back, so I'm not going to check. But these are out of print, very hard to find. I got my copies probably 5 years ago. I really lucked out. I found Volume 2, I think it was, at a convention. I literally just paid cover price for it. It was just in with their manga. And even at that time, it was worth quite a bit more than cover price, so I really lucked out. And then I just had to keep an eye out on eBay for a long time to get Volume 2. And I eventually found it for a pretty reasonable price. Even at that time, I think it was $60 to $80 or something like that I paid for it, so it was pretty pricey, but I really wanted to have the second volume, so I pulled the trigger, and I'm glad I did, because I tried to find some copies of this to check the prices before making this video, and the prices were at least $200 for Volume 2, and I couldn't even find any Volume 1, so I imagine the price is probably going to be $200 to $300 at least for Volume 1 as well. So if you are looking to get these, if you want them right now, be prepared to spend a pretty penny. If you're willing to be patient though, like with anything in collecting, if you just keep an eye out, check eBay, check Amazon, check Abe Books, check a lot of those websites where you can find cheap books listed for auction, or just buy like thrift stores that list them online and things like that. You may luck out and find a cheap listing. You may also find an auction where, because it's kind of a niche thing, being horror manga in general, you may not have a lot of competition, and you may be able to score something for a pretty good price. So these are definitely, I would say after Drifting Classroom, probably the next best thing to read from Kazuo Umezz. Cat-Eyed Boy is a very beloved character. It's equal parts horror and cute. It's a very endearing character. There's a lot of weird enemies and friends that he makes in these stories. It's got that sort of a childlike, cartoony charm to it, but there's still monsters and gore and a lot of like sort of gothic imagery of dark, stormy nights and terrible situations. So it's got a very sort of macabre vibe. It's almost like the Japanese equivalent to sort of like Tim Burton material or any of that sort of darker material that appeals to children as much as adults. This has its very own unique character to it, so highly recommend these if you can find some copies that you can afford. I already mentioned it in the Junji Ito video, but I'm going to show this again in this video. This is an International Free Comic Day Drifting Classroom chapter that also has a Junji Ito story from Smashed in it. This is just a weird oddity. It's a Viz publication. It's like a single comic book volume that's got a whole chapter from Drifting Classroom in it. And it's just sort of like a promo item. This wasn't something you could buy. It's something you could get for free if you went to comic shops on that International Comics Day that they published this, and they would just give it to you. So it's a very weird oddity. It's hard to find these now. I haven't looked online, but I know even when these just came out, I had to pay like $30 for this because, you know, they just weren't meant really to be sold like that. So that naturally makes them pretty collectible. So this is just a weird oddity. I don't think there's any other instance of an English horror manga printing in sort of like a standard comic book format. So it's just a really unique item to have in the collection. So that's all of the manga volumes. Now I'm going to get into some of the figures and just sort of oddities that I have regarding Kazuo Umezz in my collection. So first up we have this little figure. This is a figure of Orochi, and I think this is from the Orochi Blood comic, though I can't quite remember. But this is a pretty detailed little figure considering how inexpensive they are relative to other figures that you could be collecting. These were released in Japan. This is not something you can just buy in the West, but this is something that you can find on eBay. You can buy it from Mandarake, as I mentioned before, and back when I bought this, you could find these figures from $10 to $30. Now I think the price is going up a little bit, especially for very specific figures that are a little harder to find. I think this one's actually a little easier to find. But yeah, just a really, really cool thing to put on your manga shelf. They come in boxes that look like this. I've got the boxes still for all the ones that I open. They are like a blind box sort of item. You can see some of the other ones that you can get there. And I have all of the horror manga related ones that are in here, I believe, except for one of the Drifting Classroom ones that I've actually never seen for sale anywhere. The one down there with the main character. But yeah, I've got a bunch of sealed ones in the boxes that I won't show off. They're all opened, but they're in like plastic bags. You can't really see them very well. But the ones that look the coolest, I actually purchased additional opened versions of them so that I could display them. So this is another one. This is probably my favorite. This is a little girl getting chased by the snake woman from Reptilia, one of his most popular stories of the sort of slit-mouthed snake woman. So as you can see, let's see if it'll focus quite on this. Just a fairly well-detailed little figure. Something cool to put on your shelf. I think I only paid like $20 for this one. It was not that expensive, and I think you can still find this one relatively inexpensively, so something worth picking up if you're into Kazuo Umezz. And then we have this big guy. This is actually a two-part set. This is a scene from the Drifting Classroom where a giant sort of crab-like insect creature busts through a wall, and one of the characters has to fight him off with an axe. As you can see, this comes apart. They're kind of like linked together. You have to kind of build the arms onto this after you put them together. But it is actually two toys from that sort of blind box that fit together to create this little diorama. So this is something I actually went out of my way to pick up the second half of it because I really wanted to complete the set, and I think this big bug guy one is actually getting pretty expensive, so it's a harder one to complete, but it just looks really, really cool. Next up we have this little cat-eyed boy figure. I forget what this character is actually called. This is kind of like a Japanese version of like Funko Pops, a sort of standard mimetic figure that has its own format that they repaint in different colors to match different pop culture figures. So this is a little cat-eyed boy one. This is something a friend of mine actually found in a shop and picked up for me, so definitely a cool little addition to the collection. I think there's another version of a different cat-eyed boy that you can get too in this format, but I've just got this one. Next up we have two of probably the coolest Kazuo Umezz non-manga items that I have, and that is these two figures here. This one is a character called Chicken George, and he's actually from a series called 14, which has not been published in English, sadly. I don't think it ever will be because it's a really, really long series, but oh my god, is it ever a trip. It's basically this crazy dystopian futuristic sci-fi horror about this guy who is like a lab-grown chicken that was meant for like just food, that developed sentience and grew into this big chicken man, and just goes through this crazy nightmare odyssey of dealing with his horrifying existence. It's kind of like a Frankenstein story, but there's like just wild, crazy sci-fi stuff that goes on in it. A crazy story, definitely worth a read. But this is an amazing little figure. Came sealed, ordered this from Mandarake, much like with all of my other figures from horror manga. And this one wasn't too bad, actually. I think I only paid $20 or $30 for it on Mandarake. If you look on eBay, you'll find people trying to charge, you know, $60, $80, $100 for these. They definitely will go for that price once more people catch on and start picking up the cheap copies of these. But if you order these from Mandarake, you can get them for a lot less than that, at least for now. There's not a ton of these listed even on there, so once they go, I think you're going to be pretty much stuck at those $80 to $100 prices for these. But for now, still pretty affordable if you pick them up and if you're willing to pay the shipping and import fees, which even after you add all them up, it's still way cheaper than buying them on eBay. And the other one here is my favorite. This is Cat-Eyed Boy. A lot of these figures come in different colors. You can get like a black and white one of these. You can get a glow-in-the-dark one. I wanted to just have the original color scheme here. He's getting a little dusty. I gotta dust off these boxes sometime, but I think he's actually a wind-up toy. If he were out of the box, you could wind him up and he'd walk around. But yeah, this is very similar to the Hideshi Hino figures made by the same company. So they're just really cool little collectibles to have, and they look really great on the shelf with all the other horror manga. And this one is more expensive than the Chicken George ones, obviously, because he's a more popular, beloved character. But again, you can still get these reasonably inexpensively on Mandarake, and soon you're probably going to be stuck with the prices on eBay once those Mandarake copies get picked up, and you're probably looking at $80 or more for these after that. And that does it for the Kazuo Umezz shelf of my horror manga collection. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope it was worth the wait. I hope I won't make you wait as long for the next one, but you never know. I'm not going to make promises anymore because I'm not very good at keeping them. But if you guys enjoyed this, please stick around. I'm going to make other horror manga videos. I'd like to talk more soon about upcoming horror manga that you can pick up. It's a really good time right now in horror manga for a lot of weird niche things that are really not on a lot of people's radar that is coming out in English pretty soon. So I'm going to try to touch on that in a future video. If you guys enjoyed this, give this a like, leave a comment, subscribe, hit the bell, you know the drill. Every little thing helps so much in the YouTube algorithm, and that at the end of the day is going to be what allows me to keep making these videos for you guys. If there's any particular thing that you guys want to see from my collection or you want to hear me talk about, let me know in the comments, and I would like to jump into another one of these videos in the near future. This is the last really long, like full shelf, all from one author that I've got, so I'll either be doing some shorter videos focusing on some smaller manga authors, or maybe I'll combine a few into single videos. But yeah, stay tuned if you want to catch more of these, and I will see you guys in the next one.